Welcome back to Cult Pop. I'm your host, Jim Hall, and with me today is Cherie Priest, author of Bloodshot. She's one of my favorite guests. She's been on multiple times. I believe this is the fourth time you've been on, Cherie.
Something like that.
So happy to have you back. Bloodshot is the newest book that's out that we wanted to talk about, and there's two or three others that have, since the last time, you've been one busy lady in the past year, so there's a couple of new novels out since the last time we've had you on. But the first, as this show comes to air, Bloodshot will be in stores. It's available online. And let's just jump right in and talk about Bloodshot. You've created a great new character, Raylene, the Cheshire Red, Raylene Pendle, Cheshire Red, a vampire thief, and an incredible character that is sometimes mistaken for a man.
Yes.
And your book, just the beginning really got me. I absolutely love all your stuff, but I was apprehensive because normally urban fantasy isn't quite my thing, where it's just some type of urban fantasies doesn't get it for me. This is really, really cool. And the vampire stuff, you have a whole new take on vampires.
I don't know if it's new.
Well, a lot of new and interesting stuff going on. And your lead vampire, instead of being like Twilight or something, is a master thief. And the coolest thing is that, what I think is really funny, is that she's this sexy lady vampire, but all the people out to get her because she's a master thief think she's a man. Because she's tall and slender, tallish for a lady, shorter for a man, slender. And so I think that's really neat. But let's talk a little bit about the book. Give me some stuff that you can give away without ruining it for the people at home.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you.
You're
never
welcome.
give me a chance to go, thank you,
well,
Jim.
I've got so much good stuff to say about your book.
Thank you. Bloodshot was a lot of fun. I was contracted for it, I guess, about 2 years ago now, and kind of wasn't really sure which direction I wanted my career to go. And I do a lot of really dark stuff. I've done a lot of horror. I've done a lot of the steampunk stuff tends to run pretty dark too. And I wanted to do something funny, and urban fantasy seemed like excuse me, like a good place to do that. So I wanted to take a little bit of a noir angle with it, and I think it was in Wachowski, never underestimate a man's ability to underestimate a woman, and kind of the assumption that certain kinds of careers or occupations typically belong to men, masculine pronoun by default. And I thought that if there was this thief who was this good and nobody knew what she looked like, there's kind of a loose affiliation of freelancers who kind of have an Alice in Wonderland theme. So she knows somebody she calls the Bad Hatter. And there's a white queen and a red queen who will turn up later. And it was just a lot of fun to do. And she is, well, if I laughed when you said a new take on vampires, it's actually because I started her with a very old take. Something that I noticed years ago that I thought was really interesting about vampire myth and lore is how in a number of traditions around the world, they're severely obsessive compulsive. If you want to get away from them, you throw a fistful of rice or a fistful of grain, and they have to stop and count every little piece before they can come after you. And they won't cross lines in running water. And I realize there's supposed to be religious signifiers for that, and that's fine. But it sounds to me like, I know a lot of obsessive compulsive people. I'm like, well, it runs in my family, and so some of my family members have it very strongly. And I have a couple friends also. It's like once they realize you know how to deal with OCD people, you kind of attract them. And so I thought, well, this will be interesting. This will be fun. Let's take this old-fashioned notion that there's OCD and give that. Let's see what that looks like now with what we understand of it now. And Raylene's kind of more monk with the tapping and the fidgeting and the anxiety and whatnot.
A lot of different anxiety. Yeah, a few different things.
She's got some anxiety issues.
One of the things I want to talk about with this book is that it seems a little more. All of your books, adult, but this is very much more for an adult audience.
There's a lot of bad language in it, yes. I'm sorry.
Even the opening, there's a line I told my buddy about coming in, and I laughed out loud when I read it, and I thought, wow, this is okay. This is definitely more adult than not that the stuff wasn't, Dreadnought and all these other Bone Shaker we all love, but anybody of any age, you could be comfortable, son or daughter, 13, say, hey, read this.
Yeah, Bone Shaker gets a lot of young adult crossover, actually.
And so I think that's really great, but this is definitely more for an adult audience.
It's not steampunk. It has nothing to do with that franchise. I was trying to talk them into doing my name like CM Priest or something, just not to disavow it, because I like this book, I'm proud of it, it was fun to do, but something to set it apart from the things that I'm otherwise known for, just to keep people from being confused. But that's okay, because this is the first book where my name is like as big as the title.
Yes, which is very nice.
I'm led to understand that that's a milestone.
Very nice. Something else, in regards to this book now, it's funny that I'll say this, The Clockwork Century has many working components in it, but all of those books are standalone books. When I read this, when I read this, I thought two things. One, very much action and stylistically, that it could be a film.
Thank you.
That very much it could end up being a film.
I hope other people watching maybe hear that.
I think people will, because even looking at some other comments online and stuff, I noticed that some people seem to think that. And that's the first thing I thought reading it. And that also, it's very much, obviously, that this is going to be a returning character.
Well, I hope
and a few different returning characters, it seems like, will be coming through this because of this book. Is that what you're thinking, that you definitely want to?
Oh, I'll write as many of them as people want to
write.
As people want to read, I'll write as many as they want. There's definitely a sequel coming, and they're releasing them both this year, actually. The follow-up's called Hellbent, and it, I believe, is slated for the end of August. So it was only a 2-book deal, so those are the only 2 right now. But if this sells well, probably fairly quickly they'll come after me for more, so they can continue to release them close together.
Well, it seems like it definitely lends itself to multiple story possibilities. You have Men in Black. You've got, it was half urban fantasy, half conspiracy, half
little noir.
Noir in there. So I really liked the different blends of stuff there. But let's give just a little bit of the opening to get people who might be learning about you for the first time. The opening really kind of caught me.
But it's got bad words in it.
Well, meaning we won't read that, but kind of give the folks at home the setup. The first 15 pages really kind of hook you in, where she's talking about that her career is basically a thief, and that she's a great thief and all that. And then she's contacted in a strange way by another vampire who happens to have been horribly afflicted and wants to find out what's going on there. And so why don't you give us a little bit of...
well, the general idea was that there's this, or there was at one point about 10 years ago, this covert government operation that was basically taking paranormal creatures, such as vampires, and experimenting on them. Specifically with vampires, they wanted to biohack their night vision for soldiers. And in the process of that, it actually blinded this particular vampire. And he has found a doctor in Canada who's willing to try and maybe fix him a little bit, but he needs his medical records, and which sounds like a medical records on a dead thing. Well, so he hires her to go steal his medical records back, and with neither of them knowing exactly what all that's going to lead to. But it's one of these things, like the program closed down, and then it seems to have quietly reopened again.
Right, things are going on.
And things seem to be going on, and Raylene gets dragged into that. And she ends up also meeting, as she is looking for other people who are in this program, she encounters a drag queen in Atlanta whose name is either Adrian De Jesus or Sister Rose, depending on what he's or she is wearing that day. And she and Adrian become real good friends, and he turns up in the next. It was fun doing pronouns for that too.
Yeah, very colorful character.
It was hard doing pronouns because I didn't know how to come at. He's not transgendered. He's not transsexual. He's a straight guy who likes to wear women's clothing and is really fabulous. And he's a Cuban American, and so and a Southern guy to boot. And he's kind of loosely based on somebody I knew back in the Southeast, and so I thought, well, he gets masculine pronouns when he is in dude wear, and if you were going to that much trouble to look like a woman, I say we give you lady pronouns.
You want
That's fine.
To be recognized as a
right.
woman.
I'm like right on. So they actually become real good friends, and he's central to the second book as well. So.
Okay, well, excellent, folks. I think you're really going to want to go pick that up. As always, we've shown Cherie's website throughout. She's got a lot of good information there. You can order the book through the website or any of your favorite bookstores. So that's Bloodshot. It'll be out right now as you watch the show. So you can get it on your Kindle. You can get it at the bookstore. You can get it any way you like to get your books. Go out and pick it up. Now, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what you've got so many fans out there for right now, and that's The Clockwork Century. And your newest book for that is Dreadnought. And we talked last time you were on about Clementine, which I just absolutely loved, which was not quite a sequel to Bone Shaker. It's just a book that takes place in that universe. Well, Dreadnought is the same type situation. It's a book that takes place in the Clockwork Century universe, where the Civil War is going on for 20 plus years. And what I really liked about it is that there are a lot of interconnections, though, with Bone Shaker. There's a lot of different things going on. If you've read it,
there are a few things that will make a lot more sense, but I try to make them standalone.
Right, they're very much standalone, but it's fun for people who are going to read and be followers that, okay, this person is related there. You're going to go see this father. That is this person. Right. Okay. And so Mercy Lynch, when we start Dreadnought, Mercy Lynch, is our protagonist, great lady working in a hospital, saving these poor kids that come off the battlefield, doing the best she can. And you really kind of get to like her right from the get-go because she's helping some poor soldier. He lost his watch, I believe.
In the laundry.
And he was really, really concerned about that. And she, you really kind of like her because I thought, well, that's with all the stuff and the hell and commotion going on. And I really like that reading Andersonville way back when and all that. It really got the gritty feel of how just shitty that situation would be. And so she's in that situation. She's a nurse and everyday misery. And then you wouldn't think any misery could be piled on, and then she gets two notes within a day. She gets some really bad news about her husband.
Yeah.
So she's widowed, and then she gets news about I guess would it be an estranged father or biological father?
Yeah, her bio dad. He went west looking for gold years before and disappeared. Never came back. Disappeared, with his brother and a nephew, and she never did. Her mother remarried and whatnot. But no, actually, it was really interesting doing research on this one because. I mean, Civil War hospitals, I mean, that's, everybody knows how horrible
right.
and sawing off limbs and people dying of infections and things. But Louise May Alcott actually wrote about working
right.
in a Civil War hospital, and it was something it was notes from a Civil War hospital or something like that. But they were collected and published. And she was actually working in a hospital about 100 miles away from the one talked about in there. And it was just really neat because you find out like what they called things and what they used, and it was very just brutal. Like she walks in this door one day and she is kind of upper middle class educated woman who wants to help the war effort, and she walks in and somebody hands her a bar of soap and a basin and goes, "You see that row of guys over there? Pull off their clothes, wash them, and set them up against a wall." She's like, "Oh my God!" And she wrote these letters home under the name Tribulation Periwinkle, and. Partly because the new nurses, not the nurses who'd been there a while, would carry little vials of flower oil or perfume around to kind of, about the smell. And hers was periwinkle, so she was Tribulation Periwinkle. And her parents collected them and had them published in the local newspaper. So now you can get them again. And I used them rather extensively to flesh that out.
You acknowledged in the
I do mention it.
I'm
like, hey,
hey, this was really
yes, it was very helpful, very, very helpful. And also, I mean, the book is dedicated to my dad and my stepmom because they are military nurses themselves. They're retired now, but like my dad was a medic in Vietnam, and my stepmother was an emergency room nurse for years and years, head ER nurse usually. She went off on the USNS Mercy to the Philippines and around the world, and I have her old combat boots actually.
Oh wow!
When she retired, she gave them to me. It was grunge was popular, and I was very excited. And she said, "You can have them on the condition that you don't ever throw them away. If you don't want them anymore, you have to give them back."
Yeah, you never throw away a good pair of boots.
No. I still have them.
Yeah.
I've had them now for I guess 15 years. But no, so it's like I had people to talk to about this, and I have grown up around emergency medical professionals and military people, and I wanted to do a story about. There's a certain level of competence that I find very, very appealing. Elizabeth Bear and I joke about it every now and again. She calls it competence porn, where we really like watching people who are good at what they do go be good at what they do.
Right.
And I like writing competent characters, and I like knowing competent people. And I used to joke, I mean, I say in the dedication that my parents could come home and find a UFO, and like a bus full of pregnant women crash through their living room while there's a gunfight and cops and robbers. Yeah, and like...
And fix everything in 5 minutes, or maybe 10,
right,
you said something like maybe
10.
It's 10, yeah.
But no, my stepmother in particular used to have this thing she would do, because she'd been triaging for decades, and like if something looks just crazy, she would just stop and she'd go, "Okay, first." And then it's nailed down in 60 seconds or less, and I just thought it was amazing. And I wanted to do that kind of character, somebody who is aware of her limitations and knows what she can and can't do, and is still overwhelmed, is still, there's just more than she can handle. And Mercy also is quite young, she's in her early 20s, and she's semi-literate. She doesn't read and write very well.
Yeah, I got the feel she was more very smart about the world and maybe not, hadn't
farm girl
from
Waterford, Virginia.
Right.
But also when you read about Southern women during the Civil War, you get the diaries of the wealthy women who, oh my, and today the Yankees came, whatever. The vast majority of Southern people, especially in the 19th century, were not wealthy. They were poor, semi-educated, farmers and merchants and whatever you do. But in the 19th century, a lot of people couldn't read and write very well, especially women. So she was. It's interesting for me to do that kind of thing to have people who aren't terribly well educated or people who aren't, but are very smart and very competent, very capable.
Because there are a lot of people that don't have the
like
opportunity, but get education any way they can through life, and
the hard way.
Yeah, she seemed to be a very competent, very strong character.
And well, you know who her father is if you've read Bone Shakers.
Right. Well, that's what I didn't want to. I don't want to say.
That's okay. Well, it's on the back actually. It has her maiden name.
Okay.
She's Vanita Mae Swackhammer Lynch.
Right. And so if you remember from Bone Shaker, there's a very important character from that, because I don't want to ruin it if people. Because sometimes you read books in reverse order, like I read this and then go back. So, but what I really like is the first 50 pages. You're really kicking it.
In the hospital.
She goes through that horrible stuff in the hospital, and just some real. I think at home, I think you're really gonna like the character because of what I said about the watch. And I'm a very caring person, but really together and not one of these weepy, whiny people. She's working under these hard situations, gets this horrible news, and then it just cranks up. She decides, I've just lost in 24 hours my husband, and now I find out that my dad is ill.
Yeah, she doesn't know what's happened. All she knows is something has befallen
something's
him.
Going right. It says something, and
he wants to see her one last time.
And so on somebody else's, there's a patient there, and he kind of says, well, I know if being here, I haven't had anybody nice
one
to
of
have.
one of the retained men, they usually called them. They were soldiers who had been hurt too badly to go back to the front, but they stayed in the hospitals and helped work. And actually, a lot of I hesitate to say a lot of it's true. It's not true, but the Robertson Hospital where she's working was a real place, and Sally Louisa Tompkins was a real person, and Clara Barton, obviously, who founded the Red Cross, but. One of the things that I thought was interesting when I started reading into this, when Clara Barton had seen the Red Cross active in Europe, and in 1880, when the book is set, is very early for the American Red Cross, and I realize that, and people send me letters. I know. It's like I know.
I'm going to bring that up later
about
all the
people
letters
send me
you must
letters.
get.
But I wanted to do it anyway. But what she did in America before the Red Cross, actually, at the Andersonville camp, since you mentioned that, you're probably familiar with the Atwater list.
Yes.
Dorrance Atwater, this guy, was keeping this list of all the men who died there. And when he got out, as he began to heal and recover, he started wandering around making widows and orphans, telling people that their husbands and fathers had died. And Clara Barton sponsored him and came around with him. And it was an important thing to do because if they just went away, you just didn't know.
Yeah, you just didn't know that they'd leave me, or is
and you didn't get a government pension. You didn't get their benefits. You didn't get, and so if your name turns up on the Atwater list, well, that's good news and bad news.
Right, you lose somebody, but you get some money from it.
Yeah, and Mercy in particular, something has been interesting to me, especially because I live in the Northwest now, is how often I have to explain that Kentucky is not a southern state, which is not something I have to tell Southerners, but there's this general perception that kind of everything over there south of the river is that's the Mason-Dixon. No, it's really not. And so her husband's from Kentucky, which is a Union state. He was a Union boy. But the war was very complicated, and it really was brother against brother, and these things happened.
He was concerned. I think you wrote something about her husband who passed kind of fought because he was concerned. He fought for the side that was going to defend his land.
Well,
basically is what it came down to.
I mean, obviously it was a very complicated situation all around, but especially the people who didn't have any specific vested interest in what was being fought over. Well, fought because people were coming and burning down their farms, so you join up. And obviously not everyone, and it was, but there was enough of that, especially in the border states, where so much of the fighting happened, and people's reasons for becoming involved on both sides was very complicated. But I didn't want to gloss over that. I was like, okay, well, this will be complicated. Here we go, and here's this complicated person who is a Southerner and has Southern loyalties but she was married to this Union guy, but she got to keep that quiet here. But it'll help her here, but then you get West, which is unincorporated, and which do you play? How do you spin that? And so she was a fun character to do.
Right, that's why I wanted to mention for at home too, that all this goes on, so I don't want it to sound as if it's all very depressing and all. That's first 50 pages is the hospital stuff, even the first 30. And then your usual wild, crazy adventure starts happening. We've got airship crashes. We've got
steampunk Texas Rangers and undead Mexican separatists.
Yeah, we've got people in the middle of dropped right in the middle of a war going on, a war zone, and you still have to get out west. So you outdid yourself with Dreadnought.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed that. I just absolutely enjoy this clockwork century that you've created for yourself, where there's so many fun things you can do. And since we have time, the whole show's devoted to you. Another little neat thing, I think, is that you have, both on your website, you've had some free stories, but you have the freedom now to, when you're doing short stories for different collections, maybe put some of those short stories in this Clockwork Century. And you've done just that with The Living Dead, too.
Yep.
That's the correct,
The Living Dead,
Two, right? So it's The Living Dead, and
Not
it's
also.
a great, but meaning it was The Living
Yes.
Dead. There's some other. There's The New Dead. There's a bunch of
It's
zombie
the
anthologies.
Nightshade book anthology. Nightshade books by John Joseph Adams is the editor.
Okay, and I've got both. They're really fantastic, and you've got some really fantastic authors in the zombie and any genre.
It's
with
great
you
company
there.
to be in.
Yeah, a lot of great authors. But you've got a great story in
thank
there.
you.
If you wanted to maybe talk a little bit about that, and
Well, it's called Reluctance, and it's been fun doing some shorter pieces like with Clementine that I did, which was not a full-length book, it's more of a novella, and Tanglefoot and a few other little things. But it's been fun to kind of fill in some of the gaps because this world setting suggests a lot of stories, and I kind of feel like I found my Discworld. If you read Terry Pratchett, it's like no, in the unincorporated West, something I got interested in is how toward the end of the war, in real life in the 1860s, they were starting to investigate hydrogen-powered flight, which was tricky for a number of reasons, not least of all because it's very difficult to make and also because it's really flammable and
very explosive.
Very explosive, as it turns out. But I was digging around and I turned up this guy who has my favorite Victorian name ever. His real name was Thaddeus Lobieski Constantine Lowe. And he was an aeronautics engineer during the Civil War. I mean, this is the most steampunk man ever. And there's this book, I forget the author suddenly, I feel bad, kind of an academic type thing called The War of the Aeronauts that talks about his development. And I'm sorry, I say all that to say this. I found diagrams for his patents for how to create hydrogen basically in a battlefield scenario. He took a couple of military carts and retrofitted them and used, rubber tubing and iron fillings and sulfuric acid. And I'm like, that's how you do it. Okay, well.
If it can be done, I'm going to put it in
If it can
my
be
book.
done, and it's not fast. But especially with a country as big as America, when before the railroads and before the highway system, it takes a long time. It's hard to get places, and if your transportation is hydrogen powered, you need hydrogen fill-up stops, and because that's going to get away, it's going to leak, you're going to burn it off, whatever. But there's no gas stations. Maybe we literally need a gas station, and so this idea that there are these pipework docks that people can, dock their ships to and then fill up and then take off again.
When I read it, it seems like a gas station for the...
It's a gas station for dirigibles,
Right.
yes. So Reluctance is about a boy named Walter McMullen, who's a Union veteran, and he's basically a flyer for the equivalent of the dirigible Pony Express. And he will probably turn up in later books if I get to do too many more of them. 2 more coming, but I like Walter. I want to bring him back. And he comes to this little outpost that's outside of Oneida, which is the old name for Amarillo, Texas. And he encounters basically the same batch of undead who turn up in Dreadnought. So they're loosely connected, and if you haven't read it, you wouldn't know that, but it should be okay. But I wanted to do a character who had a really quick learning curve. Because a lot of times if you're doing these character studies or these pieces where there's not a lot of living people and a lot of zombies or whatever, there's the ratcheting up of them figuring out how to do things and deciding how much violence to deploy while they figure out what's going on. And I didn't want that. And one of the more particularly horrifying aspects of the war was how young some of these soldiers were.
Sure. 16, 15.
Oh, they've documented them down to 12, 11
Yeah.
years old. Mostly in the South where they were hurting for people more.
Right.
But it was very common for 13, 14, 15-year-olds to go off to battle. And I liked the idea of taking this kid who's maybe 18 or 19 and already battle-hardened.
Right.
and this is a plum job for him. It's a dangerous job, and nobody wants it. He's like, I've retired, man. This is great.
Yeah, this is great.
This is great.
Plush life.
Plush life. And he's a little disabled. He has a false leg because he lost a leg. And maybe or maybe not be haunted, maybe or maybe not be, go me, may or may not be haunted by his dead brother, to whom he talks anyway. Whether or not the brother talks back is up for grabs. So, and it was just kind of interesting to me that a very young soldier and you drop a kid who will shoot first and ask questions later into a scenario where the whole place is just overrun. And partly, I mean, like my father went to Vietnam as a teenager and came back very badly hurt. And I knew him and his friends growing up and all these guys. I'm like, well, let's have them killing zombies, these guys. I think that'll be fun. So, so I like Walter. He'll turn up again.
It's a fun story, and it had me thinking. It's very enjoyable. If you're just a zombie fan, I think you may have gotten yourself some more fans just through people that are not going to be familiar with you reading that story.
I've gotten a few emails off it.
I think you might find some people that way, but 2 questions made me think about that as we're running a little low on time. We've still got some time.
Sorry.
No. I just two things I was thinking about. One with with that, you've got that short story. You've got Clementine, which could be considered a short story. In the future, can we look forward to maybe a collection of all of these short stories and some of those?
Actually, Macmillan made an offer for one, but at the time I just didn't have enough material to justify it, and I said I can't do that right now. And Subterranean probably will want to collect some.
Right,
at
that's
some
what
point.
I figured. Subpress always does.
Yeah, they're great.
You have
they're
that
awesome.
beautiful Clementine,
So good. And that will be out
Dreadful
in
Skin.
Yes,
It was a
yeah.
beautiful collection, or not collection, but a beautiful book way back
Well, it was
when.
kind of a collection.
Yeah.
No, Clementine will be out in trade paperback. It was a
Okay.
limited hardback, so not a lot of people got it, and I
Right.
get hate mail about it all the time. You can get it in ebook form, but it will be out in trade paperback in the fall.
Okay.
This year, as I understand it.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left, so there's a couple things I wanted to cover. One, when we were talking about Bone Shaker, you got a lot of mail that I don't think you realized that Washington,
Yeah.
Seattle didn't have walls around it, and
Yeah.
there really wasn't poisonous gas. Are you still getting a lot of
Oh,
dreadnought?
totally.
Are people telling you that the war wasn't 20 years? And
Little bit,
Have we
little
been
bit.
successful in trying to limit some of that mail for you? That,
Well, I've been a little surprised with Dreadnought because I expected more of it because it deals with the alternate Civil War, and people who like the Civil War are really into the Civil War. And even before it came out, I got my first thing. Somebody posted on my Facebook page, somebody who'd gotten an ARC, and it just says, "Really, Sally Louisa Tompkins meeting Clara Barton." And I was like, "Oh no, here come the stitch
It's gonna
counters.
start, yeah, here it goes.
But he was cool, and he's like, "No, I thought it was funny." And when I replied something to the effect of, "Look, I was just having a good time, man." And he said, "No, I thought it was funny. Listen, I'm on this board of directors for the American Civil War Society in Richmond,
okay,
Virginia. Would
good,
you like to
yeah.
come out here?"
Very cool.
So they invited me out to Richmond, and really, I get way more email about Bone Shaker from that, from people trying to tell me when
Right,
when
what
buildings
history,
were.
right.
Well, you know that this building wasn't built until 19. Well, yeah. Did you know
Right.
we never had zombies?
right, exactly.
Here?
There wasn't zombies and green gas coming out
No,
of the ground.
zombies don't slow them down. But,
Well,
but
I'm glad you don't
the
have
train
some-
station. Oh.
That just really, when you told me that, one of the last interviews we did, I really got a kick out of that. The people are, okay, it's an alternate history with zombies running
With
around, and you're worried
zombies.
about this. But
They don't stumble over the zombies, but boy, the train station. Oh, don't get them started.
I just thought that was funny, but hopefully we'll stop some of that. And in this book, I think right at the very get-go, you say, look, I realize I'm playing
Yes.
fast and loose with some of the don't write me the letters.
Partly because I get hate mail for the afterword in Bone Shaker. My editor asked for one. She's like, you should probably do something talking about the real history and the fake history. So, but it had to go right now, so I hurried up and I wrote it really, really fast, and it comes off a little flippant, I admit. But people are like, well, I liked your book until I read that. And I'm sorry. There's no pleasing anyone.
Yeah.
So we just have the little disclaimer at the beginning of Dreadnought, that's all.
Well, I certainly enjoy your stuff, and I know my fans who watch the show enjoy your stuff. We get a lot of positive feedback.
Oh, good. Well, thank you.
We're just about at the end of the show, so as usual, I like to give everyone a chance to talk about their website. So tell the folks at home you've got not only your own personal website, but the Clockwork Century website, which is really cool.
It's just theclockworkcentury.com, and that's for all the all that stuff in particular, all the news and updates for that, and just cherrypriest.com. But over on Clockwork Century, I'm about to start talking about Ganymede, the sequel, which is set in New Orleans, and I get to use the word zombie.
Excellent.
Finally, I get to call them zombies. And
All right, well, excellent. As always, I absolutely love having you on the show.
Oh, thank you for
And
having me.
As
Gosh.
always, when we've got more stuff from you, we'll have you on again and again. I just love having you. So thanks so much for being on the show, and continued success in 2011.
thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Folks, thanks so much for watching. As always, if you only saw half the show, go to the website, check it out, www.cult-pop.com. You can rewatch every episode we've ever done, plus links to every guest we've ever had. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.